right. This is still card 1, but it's card 1 and it's going to be basic soldering. I want to make sure you guys understand the basic concepts of soldering because it's rather critical that you do it properly and you understand the basic concepts so that soldering is not part of the problem. Soldering needs to be part of the solution. All right, so the types of things you're going to be soldering here, potentially, you'll be soldering this 22 gauge solid wire, and you'll be soldering probably some of these ceramic resistors, which have pretty stiff leads. You'll probably be soldering some switches and other components with tabs like relays, and you'll be soldering these resistors, and you may be soldering, well, if you do it the way I have it planned, you'll be soldering some of these lights, and these lights have flexible wire, and you'll be using some very, very, very thin solder. Okay, now this is 032. As you can see right here, 032. That's the largest you should use. Do not use anything larger than that. And don't use anything more than, in this case, I think this says 15 watts and 30 watts. Kind of hard to read, but there you go. 15 watts and 30 watts. 15 watts and 30 watts. Okay? And 30 is actually a lot. So 30 is quite a bit. So let me go through some basic things here. Get all this crud out of the way. And what I'm going to do, and the way that I do this, is you take the tape, and you can put the tape wherever you can put the tape. And I usually go ahead and tear enough for the whole thing so that I can put this roll aside, because the roll tends to kind of get all goofed up and gets all messed up and everything. So I'll put some on the card here for your positive and your negative, and then I'll put some on the for the circuitry. The easiest way to do this that I've found is to bend it towards the copper, and then that tends to make the little piece of paper come off pretty easily. And then you just lay it in like this, and you do that, and there you go. And then I fold it under there, and take another piece, and you kind of bend it towards the copper, and that tends to make the paper come off pretty easily. And then you stick this down, a little sticky there. And you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect at all, but you want to be able to see what you're doing. Fold that under. And the way that you tear this is pretty simple. Again, you bend it towards the copper, and that tends to make the paper come off easily. And then what I do is I start on the ground side, just habit. And then I lay it in towards the positive side, like that. And then you can kind of put your fingernail here, and then it kind of rips pretty easy. And then you can use these smaller pieces, because I was going to have you put them here to practice soldering. And then, of course, you lose the other piece. Oh, here we go. Bend it towards the copper. That tends to make the paper pull away. And then we can do this down here again. So put it on the ground side. Now this is all, you can do anything you want. I'm just telling you what I do. I don't really care how you do it. There's no requirement that you do it any special way. But then you can kind of crease it with your nail or just pull it, and then you get a nice little finish there. And it's going to have you do a little extra soldering here. So I'll take some of these little scraps and put the scraps there like that, and a little piece of scrap here like that. And I'll pull another little piece off of here and put another piece there. Now the soldering iron's hot, and I have it on 30 watts because I want you to see how quick this is. And I'm going to give you a heads up on process of soldering, and you have to do what is referred to as tinning the iron. All right, now you need to keep the tip clean, and I usually wipe it on my leather shoe in classes because that's just easy. But when you look at this, it doesn't take a lot. It takes very little, in fact, to make this happen. I mean, it's so fast, it's hard to even believe. So here's how I say it. It's right here, and you can't see it because I didn't put it so you can see it. I'm gonna have to take this off here. Hold on. I had the cardboard taped down, but I gotta take that off. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. So here's what it says. Tin, touch, tap, take away. Okay, tin, touch, tap, take away. And what that means is you tin the iron, okay? And when you tin the iron with just a tiny little bit of solder, and then you get a bubble of solder on there, okay? See how there's a bubble of solder? There's a bubble of solder on there now? Okay? That's what actually carries the heat. Okay? Then you touch, and you tap, and you take away. And that's the whole process right there. Tin, touch, tap, take away. Tin, touch, tap, take away. If your iron's on there for more than a couple of seconds, you're there way too long. Okay, so let me slide this back. All right, so tin the iron, touch the circuit, tap with the solder, and take away. Tin, touch, tap, take away. And you just keep doing that. So it's tin, touch, tap, take away. Okay. Tin, touch, tap, take away. And then this last one here, tin. You don't need a lot. When you tin it, it's just like barely touch it. Just a tiny little bubble. Touch, tap, take away. All right, now the hotter it gets, the problem is that's how the solder moves. All right, so too much heat, and if you want to clean these up, you can certainly clean those up. That's up to you. But you don't need to. But, you know, some people like it really neat. But either way. See, the problem is that the solder follows the heat. See how the solder's following the heat there? That's why people screw up soldering, because they'll solder with too much heat, and the solder will wick up into the wire, and when the solder wicks up into the wire becomes brittle, and then the brittle wire will break. So the biggest mistake people make soldering is that they don't stop, and they go too fast, and they go too far. All right, so now the way that I had designed this, and I hope it works, is to take your copper wire, okay, which is the solid wire, and what I was planning on doing, and you guys can, if you guys come up with a better way to do it, you know, strip it down and pull the insulation off and make it bare like this. All right. And then my plan was to have you cut it at a very sharp angle like this, so you get a very sharp point on that, and then you can poke it through. It'll go through the cardboard, and it'll just sort of stick in. All right. Well, then, because that's there, it's really easy to solder. And you do the exact same thing. You tin, touch, tap, take away. Now, notice that this solder is not all balled up. You've probably soldered before where the solder just kind of balls up and sits there. Well, that's because there's not enough heat. In this case, there's plenty of heat. So heat control is the big deal. All right, so the same exact rules apply. You tin the iron. You need to keep it clean, either with a wet sponge or something. Tin, touch, tap, take away. And that's a perfectly soldered piece of wire, and it works just fine. You can make it as clean and as pretty as you want. And the plan here was for you guys to use this card as a way to practice that, and you know, may take a little bit of effort to stick these things in, you know, I don't know, or not, it just depends. Maybe in this case the 20 gauge wire would be better, but it'll go in there. You just have to kind of poke it down in there. And so it's the same exact thing. Tin the iron, tin, touch, tap, take away. Tin the iron, figure out where you're going to go, touch it, that'll heat it, tap, just tap it with the solder, and then take away. Okay, I'm going to show you now how you can solder without having to go through the poking a hole through the copper. But because I'm retaping this, because the one I did for this the first time didn't work, I can add something in that actually is kind of cool, because what I did in the next card, which has already been filmed, I just kind of took my knife and poked a hole in it and made it possible to stick things down in there without there being any real difficulty. So you just poke a little hole in it and boom, goes right down in there. This just fits right in there. So that's another alternative, and that's very simple. And like I said, if you use an X-Acto knife, this is not quite an X-Acto knife, it's actually a scalpel blade, number 11 scalpel blade, but if you use that, then that works really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to attach a resistor to the copper foil, to the circuit, I guess, without having to poke a hole through it if you would prefer not to. And the way that we're going to do this is that we're going to tin the copper. I'm going to tin the copper. Had a little bit of a thing there. And get that melted, and then get that melted. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tin the resistor, okay? And this is hopefully going to be clear because it's pretty zoomed in. So what I'm going to do is hold the resistor down, but then I'm going to put a little glob of solder on there, and I think you should be able to see that now because I tinned that. And then I'll do the same thing here. And you just kind of drag it up there, and now you have this nicely tinned, these nicely tinned leads. Okay. Well, there's a simple matter of simply doing this, and this is my way of doing it. Okay. Now that it's tinned, and this is my technique. All right. You guys can do this any way you want, but this is how I do it. I start at the bottom. It melts. I go up and I come back down. It's that fast. You can see the solder kind of glazing over. Okay, and then you come and you put this, and you do the same thing. Push it down in there. It heats up. Go up, come down, kind of blow it a little bit, and you're in there. Okay, and it's essentially permanent. Okay, so that's another way of doing this that will make it possible to install these components without actually having to poke the holes, and that's personal preference. Whether you want to do it or not is up to you. Okay, then to remove it, and I'll show you how to remove these as well, you just heat it and then lift it out, and you should be good. And then same thing here, you just heat it and lift it out, and it's out. Okay, now these will work the same way, but if you have they're gonna get hot real quick. So if it's a piece of wire with insulation on it, it may not be that big of a deal, but you can do the same thing and just heat it up, and that'll fall right out. I didn't leave them very long, so. But the point is, you you want to be able to change these things really easily. That's kind of the whole point of it, because I want you to be able to make changes really, really easily. So that's how that's done. Okay. Now you'll notice that on these drawings there's a fuse. All right. Well, the fuse is not a fuse. The fuse is just a piece of solder. And here's how I did it. It was a complete accident that I figured out how to do that. I don't take any credit for it at all, other than the fact that I screwed up. Okay. And when I screwed up, I learned something by screwing up. So that's the beauty of screwing up. And trust me, I've screwed up a lot in my life. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. Okay? So, here's how we're going to do this. And I'm going to show you how to do it. Well, first of all, what I do is I cut myself a piece of solder. It doesn't matter how long it is, but you need to have it long enough to work with. But you don't really want to be working with this if you can avoid it. So, just cut yourself a piece of solder. And then what you're going to do is you're going to do the bubble of solder, but you're not going to move the solder. Okay? So, let me do this, and I might show you this in slow motion, if it helps, I don't know. But it's the exact same thing, but you kind of tin it at the same time you do it. So you tin it, okay, you tin it, you tap it, you let it solder, and then you just let it sit. Okay? And then now the solder is stuck to the paper, stuck to the foil. And then you can cut it with your soldering iron. So you just come over here, give yourself about 2 inches, and cut it with the soldering iron. Okay, so now you have this piece right here, and you just do the exact same thing here, and you just repeat it. Oops. And you have to know what you're doing, you have to practice. That's why I say practice. Okay. Now, by the way, blowing on these things, you may hear me blow on these things, does tend to make it, cool quicker. So you notice there's a symbol for the fuse. That's the symbol you need to learn. And there's the fuse. Okay. So do this again. You just kind of tin it, tap, and this time you don't take away. You let it cool. And the problem with doing it by just trying to do it here is that the solder pulls away from you. It doesn't work. I've tried it. So you have to kind of have to feed it in there. So you just kind of do this. And then you get that. And now this is your fuse, okay? And trust me, if you screw up, that fuse will definitely blow, okay? So just practice those with your solder, okay? All right, and I'll just use this one right here. The better thing is to cut it a little bit longer, because if you goof up at the second end and you don't quite make it work, then if it's cut a little bit longer, then it's going to give you more to work with and you won't get as frustrated. So at any rate, you can do it any way you want, but I guarantee you, if you want to practice, and maybe I'll show you that on the next card, those fuses will definitely blow if you make a mistake, especially if you don't cut where the fuse has to be. So here, I'll show you that one more time, and I'll show you that with a little bit better example, because those fuses won't work right now because they're not cut. So go in there like that, and a little shorter, and then do this like this, and just kind of give it something to sit to, and then you do that, and then just get it out of the way. It doesn't really matter where you do it, but that's okay. But then if you don't cut it here, right, if you don't cut it, then the fuse isn't in the circuit, and you will melt copper and burn paper. So that's just the way I do it, like that, because it's pretty apparent. See how you just kind of fold it back like that, and you can pretty much see that it's open. So you just cut it, use a knife, use a razor blade, use an X-Acto knife, use whatever you want. Just kind of fold it back a little teeny little bit, and there you have your open circuit. And now the fuse is in the circuit. If this wasn't cut, the fuse would not be in the circuit and you wouldn't be protected. Okay? So that's pretty much that. I do want to show you how to solder onto a terminal, because it's the exact same process as here. And I'll show you this because it's important. You need to know how to do it. And the trick to it, obviously, is what I'm not doing here is to tin the iron. Thought there was a little solder on there. There's not. But the tinning is what actually carries the heat, and bop, it just pops right off. So if you do that, then it works really, really well. Okay? So what you do is you tin the wire. Okay? So the wire's tinned. See how the wire's got solder on it? And you do exactly what I mentioned earlier. Okay? You lay that on the bubble of solder. I'm trying to get it so that you'll see the solder flow. Let me see if I can zoom in anymore. It's about as well as I can zoom in there. All right, now here's the deal. It's timing. Okay, it's all timing. So you get your angles right, you bend it, you hold it, you get everything set. Don't get in a hurry, but try to get the wire so that it's pushing down on there. And then what I do is with that little bubble of solder right there on the soldering iron, see that little bubble of solder? That's important. That's tinning. I start at the bottom, then I walk up, and then I walk back, and then I blow on it, and I get a factory solder. Okay, so it started. Here, I'll take it off and do it again. And do it in slow motion, maybe. Maybe I'll show it to you in slow motion. So you lay the wire on, and then that's a wet solder. Okay, you don't want a cold solder or a dry solder. That when the solder spreads like that, then you know you've got a good solder. All right, and you don't need a lot. Okay, more is not better. More is worse. Okay, so that's basic soldering and basic circuit construction and repair here, right? So we've repaired here. So you can solder all these things on here. You can practice them, you can put as many pieces of copper on here as you want. You can put copper off to the side. You can put copper anywhere you want, and just practice, practice, practice.